Welcome to Football Never Sleeps, presented by Academy Sports and Outdoors. We're still aspiring to be viral. We're properly caffeinated tonight, and we are now a proudly sponsored YouTube show all about Notre Dame football and a fan base that's stopped turning ash into a four-letter word. For now, I'm Eric Hansen in South Bend, and hoping this weekend's green-out theme doesn't spread to my fridge. He's Tyler James, back from Fayetteville safely from a stripe out. Together, we are the content creators, word salad avoiders, and schematic fixers at blueandgold.com. On tonight's show, Notre Dame's defense took a massive step forward Saturday, but the dynamic offenses keep coming. And speaking of dynamic offenses, CJ Carr keeps putting up big numbers and inspiring bad automotive puns. We'll have more ascending players, recruiting too, and your questions, of course, so start filling up the portal. This is... Let's go!
This is Football Never Sleeps, and this is not garbage time. So we are here to bring it to you guys. We appreciate everyone being here on a Monday night. Hopefully everyone enjoyed their Saturday evening. I enjoyed an opportunity to get to watch some football after doing work, which we don't get a lot of opportunities to do because of the noon start. So that was nice. But as Eric mentioned, Football Never Sleeps is now presented by Academy Sports and Outdoors. Huddle up, football fans. Tailgate season is here, and nobody gets you ready for game day like Academy Sports and Outdoors. Swing by your local Academy store or shop online at academy.com to find everything you need, from grills to jerseys and more. Be a watch party legend with gear from top brands like Nike and Under Armour, all at unbeatable prices every day. With 8 Academy stores across Indiana and a new store coming soon to Mishawaka, fun can't lose, and neither can you. Gear up today at Academy Sports and Outdoors. We love to see the chat already hopping. Thank you for those of you who are joining us live. If you're watching us on replay, we appreciate you as well. Make sure you hit the like button on this video. Subscribe to our channel if you haven't yet. Put in some comments about our thoughts, whether you're watching live or on replay. That helps us too. We're fighting for our 5,000 subscribers, and we keep climbing thanks to you guys. So we appreciate you interacting with us and sharing our content with folks. Before we get into today's topics, once again, I want to remind folks of our subscription deal to blueandgold.com. We're now offering $1 per week for an entire year. So you can purchase an annual subscription to Blue and Gold for just $52, which is more than half off the regular price. You can head to blueandgold.com, hit the join now button at the top of the page, and take advantage of this awesome deal. And there should be a link in the subscription page in the video description below. And we always have a nice friendly reminder there scrolling at the bottom of our screen too, in case you just don't like listen to me at the beginning of these videos either. So, but let's get to Marcus Freeman, who we
Uh-oh. You muted yourself. That would have been a good bit if you did that on purpose.
It was not on purpose. I put my hands together like Marcus Freeman last week, and I hit the mute button on the microphone. Sorry, guys. Marcus Freeman spoke with reporters today to review the win at Arkansas and start looking ahead at Boise State. Eric, what were your biggest takeaways from the press conference?
I'll give you 3. First of all, what Marcus had to say about CJ Carr. He gets asked about him every press conference, and he finds new things to talk about. And I think part of that is because CJ keeps evolving. And I thought one of the interesting aspects of that today was his impact on the offensive line play, that he is getting the offensive line into the right protections. A lot of times with a young quarterback, you have a lineman that's doing that. CJ Carr is doing that, and that's helping out the offense. I was impressed with that. The defensive side, Marcus was ready to frame why there was such a big improvement in the defense. He wanted to kind of put his spin on it. I did ask him about what he learned about Chris Ash, and I thought his answer was really interesting about being in the fire with Chris Ash and what he learned from kind of inside the process. And then the third thing was just kind of the human element of Marcus Freeman. Sometimes he got asked about Jaden Mickey, who suffered a serious injury on Saturday in Boise State's game against App State. It's it's better than it looked at the time. He was knocked unconscious. I talked to his dad. He was knocked unconscious and then is in concussion protocol right now. But Marcus said, these guys aren't rental cars. And when you have relationships, even when it's just a couple of years, they're relationships for life. And I think, again, this is why players and their parents like kids to play at Notre Dame, why it's such an attractive option when there's a lot of others with an easier academic path. It's because of kind of the life experiences you get with Marcus. So those are my three. How about you? What did you like today from the press conference?
Yeah, I like the way he talked. Say it again?
Besides lunch.
I missed it. Oh, I missed that part. I didn't miss lunch, but I missed that part of what you said. I like the way that he talked about how the defense simplified without doing less. Like he explained, like you can run cover 3 5 different ways, but maybe we only need to do 1 or 2 of those ways. Players, he sort of explained it in that players need to know what they're doing, they need to know why they're doing it, and then how to get it done. And it looked at least to me, for the most part, that those 3 things were married up well. Certainly not without flaws, and plenty of room for improvement still. But I think that made a lot of sense to me. And I really appreciated his aim for perfection with the offense. He still isn't pleased with the fact that they got stopped on a 4th down attempt at the end of the first drive of the second half. And there's things that they can still do to get better, even though they ran off 9 touchdown drives in a row for the first team offense between the last 2 games. So I really like the way that they're pressing for better on both sides of the ball, even though obviously one side needs to get better in more dramatic ways. We also received some availability updates today. Cornerback Leonard Moore remains questionable after missing the last 2 games with the right ankle injury. Eric, do you think Notre Dame's secondary is going to be better in the long run from playing without Moore?
As long as they don't lose a game while he's out, and I do not think that they will lose a game. I think if he's out this game, I think that'll probably be the last one. But I do think there's a benefit for Mark Zachary being picked on, being in the fire, being experienced when Leonard Moore comes back, whether there's another injury in the secondary, whether you just want, when you go against USC, Leonard Moore and Christian Gray not to be running down the field 87 times, and having somebody else to be able to, that you can trust to be in there to give them a little bit of a rest. And Zachary's getting better and better. So I think that is a positive. And the thing that I think is going to be interesting, and you asked about this maybe a couple of press conferences ago, Tyler, would it make sense at some point, and maybe when he comes back, to flip-flop Christian Gray and Leonard Moore in terms of their duties, having Christian play into the boundary where he's been playing during this injury, and having Leonard play to the field, or at least having the flexibility to go back and forth during a game? I think that would be kind of interesting as well for us to see. And we will see it at some point, maybe even this weekend. So,
yeah, I thought like even beyond Zachary himself, like I think just the fact that Christian Gray's been able to put some good games together without Leonard Moore, and maybe because he's been able to play to that boundary position, I think that's probably overall going to help his development and help his confidence moving forward. I think even the safeties having to learn to be more cognizant when Leonard Moore is on the field, when isn't on the field. Like I think they've been tested more as a result of Leonard Moore not being out there. I think there are lessons that those guys have gained from this time without Leonard Moore. So I do think it is valuable for Notre Dame. I think you certainly don't want it to go much longer if and get him back on the field as fast as you can, because I think then you can sort of build that chemistry together. Like what we're seeing is improvements with different pieces coming in and out of the place. Now Devontae Smith is back, getting Leonard Moore back, what I think allows the secondary to get to what should be the best version of itself in terms of personnel. So I guess spinning that forward, Eric, what do you think the secondary looks like when Moore returns? Do you think Mark Zachary is someone that Notre Dame will be willing to rotate on some basis with with Christian Gray and or Leonard Moore.
I do. Again, not heavy reps, but enough that they're at their best in the fourth quarter of a close game. I just remember how gassed those guys felt like they were in the USC game last year. And again, that was culture shock coming out of the Army game and going to a real pass happy offense from the least pass happy offense in the country. I think those October 18th, circle that on your calendar. I think that's a game where that could come into play. And Dallas Golden getting some reps behind Devontae Smith, I think, is important too. And then it's going to be interesting to see how the safety rotation works out with Leonard Moore back. Not that he affects the safety rotation, but it feels like Tay Johnson's kind of taken over that spot next to Adon Schuler and playing really well, which pleases me since I got my football crush on Tay Johnson in the spring.
Yeah, he has lived up to maybe some of the thoughts that we had about him in the offseason. We weren't sure at what quantity we would see him this season, and now Notre Dame is really relying on Tay Johnson. I would like for Notre Dame to get to a spot where they could feel like they can run Mark Zachary in there if maybe Christian Gray needs a break, or even if Leonard Moore's got thrown on a couple times in a row and gets a little tired. I think there could be situations that it would be beneficial to have someone capable of doing that. I think it's a hard job to sort of come off the bench as a cornerback. But I think if you can find a way to mix those guys in and make sure that they're prepared for those situations, I think that's valuable. Dallas Golden certainly has shown a capability at the nickelback position as well. So I think that there is some potential there for what Notre Dame can do. And I think even now that they have the two safeties figured out with Adon Schuler and Tay Johnson, I think that maybe allows them to figure out more specifically, okay, how can Jalen Stroman help us maybe in smaller roles? In what ways are we best using Luke Talich? I think Talich right now is the third safety in the dime package. And I think that's a valuable aspect to Notre Dame's defense as well. So I think there's a lot of good to potentially come out of the struggles that we've seen so far. All right. Donovan Heinisch was listed as questionable with a left shoulder injury, which confirms why he played only 5 defensive snaps against Arkansas. How concerning is it if Heinisch misses more time?
I mean, he hasn't played his best football so far this year, and yet Notre Dame needs all the able bodies and experienced bodies. He's also a captain that they can get. I think one thing that softens the blow is that they've had a couple of younger, and we'll talk about these guys in more detail in a little bit, but a couple of younger interior defensive linemen have kind of stepped forward. But man, I would rather have the option of playing Donovan Heinisch than not, just given the dynamic offenses that keep rolling in a Notre Dame stadium and that will continue to do through until they get to their next bye week.
Yeah, I think he's someone you certainly want to be able to put out there. But it has been somewhat encouraging the way the other defensive tackles have stepped up. I think Gabriel Rubio has probably been Notre Dame's best defensive tackle this season. Elijah Hughes is making an impact. Jason Onye, I think, is starting to play a little bit better. We got Jared Dawson back in the mix for the Arkansas game. Specifically with Hughes, Eric, why do you think he is doing better? Why do you think he's showing up more, other than just they need him to, but why do you think he's making the most of his opportunities?
I mean, he's a real smart kid. I know that. And he's got decent size. Marcus Freeman mentioned he's not as big as some of the other interior defensive linemen like Rubio and Onye, for example. But when I watch him, I notice him in the game. He can penetrate. He gets off blocks really well. And that's what I notice because the first time I saw him in the game, I was kind of surprised. I think it was in higher leverage situations. I think it was against Purdue when I said, wow, Elijah Hughes is in the game. And then I was kind of looking for him in the Arkansas game, and I saw the same thing there. And Cole Mullen was in some higher leverage situations, maybe for the first time in his career. So what do you like about Elijah Hughes?
Yeah, I think I don't know that he does anything extremely well. Like there isn't like one thing that you see in his game, at least that I've seen in his game, that jumps off tape. I think he's done a pretty good job of shedding blocks. I think he's just sort of a solid piece in there. Like, and that's important when you are maybe not as big as some of the other guys, that you can still get shed a block, get a guy off of you, and make sure that you are able to impact the play in some way. I think he's been better in run defense than pass defense so far. But I think it's important that Notre Dame has guys playing like Elijah Hughes has and stepping up in opportunities like he has, because I think that sets a pretty good tone for the defense as a whole. And before we get to some of the questions that our viewers have submitted, I want to just mention special teamer Preston Zinter also remains questionable while he's recovering from a concussion. And that was it on the injury updates from Notre Dame. I know there was an injury-related question, so let me throw that in here. Brian Habermel said, any word on the health of Charles Jagusa, or have I missed it?
What I talked to a source today, and Notre Dame isn't on their availability report. They didn't shift him from out for the next game to, they have 3 categories, basically probable or questionable, definitely out for the next game or more, and out for the season. They did not shift him from out for the next game to out for the season. I'm not saying that that won't eventually be his status. From what I understand, I don't want to say he re-injured the shoulder injury that he had in the UTV accident. I would characterize it as a setback. He had a setback in his recovery and had to have another surgery. This is according to a source that I trust very well. And so what that means as far as his availability, I think when you have a second surgery, he's not coming back anytime real soon. It would certainly extend the timeline. I think originally we thought October was realistic. I think that's not realistic now, and we'll just see how that plays out.
Yeah, and that's why it's always important that we remember that when we pass along estimates in terms of injuries like that, those are all estimates for a reason, that every single recovery is different. There can be setbacks, and that doesn't necessarily mean it's the fault of the player or the training staff either. That sometimes things happen. Every healing process can go differently. Obviously, there's certain general timelines that doctors work off of in terms of recovering from ailments, whether it's a broken bone or a torn ligament. But certainly unfortunate if Charles Jagusa can't play the rest of the season. I think people have been very interested in where he would end up playing on the offensive line this season, where he's needed most, or where he could most impact the offensive line. And so that just reinforces how important it is that this offensive line with its current personnel continues to improve. And I think they have been so far this season. All right. Scott Fegan says, who thought that Notre Dame would be 2-2 after 4 games and still have a shot at the playoffs? Obviously, Notre Dame needs to run the table and watch at least 10 to 12 teams games drop. Just keep winning.
I kind of like how you frame that, Scott, in that they don't have control over their own destiny, but they have control a lot in terms of how they're perceived. Now, again, you can't control which teams lose above you, how many of those guys lose, and what the committee thinks of those teams. But I think at least in the last couple of weeks, Notre Dame has done a good job of, you hear a kind of a national narrative of, gosh, I wonder if they played Miami and Texas A&M again, would they win? Now, I think Texas A&M has improved on defense since they played Notre Dame. I mean, to hold Auburn under 150 yards, I thought was pretty impressive. I think their run defense is better than what the people covering the team thought that they would be. And so I'm not sure about that rematch right now, but I think maybe in November that would, or December even, would be an interesting game. And I'm not so sure Notre Dame wouldn't be better than Miami at some point, but the defensive progress has to be sustainable. So, yes, they're going to be in that conversation as long as they continue to win and they continue to show improvement. I think that's a realistic conversation to have.
Yeah, I feel a little bit like a curmudgeon in that I don't love how so much of college football discussion becomes playoff talk, especially so far from when that needs to really happen. Like, I know that's obviously the goal. Like, everyone wants their team to get there, so that's part of why it's so interesting. But I to me, it's more fascinating to watch the team develop and figure out its issues and be better and to make an argument for why it can be a playoff team. But I think it just has to do so much before it gets there that's more interesting to me. I know people want to discuss the odds of the playoff. And part of the reason I just don't like it so much is because we have no idea what's going to happen everywhere else. Like, crazy things happen every weekend in college football. And to try to project that out 2 months from now, it's not a task that I want to take on. But I enjoy that, or I gladly allow others to engage in that more heavily than I do.
I will. I like it. I think it's fun. And I think it's one of the things, if you're a Notre Dame fan, I think the threshold of whether you're going to be emotionally invested or not is whether you think they have a shot at the playoffs or not. I know with baseball, I was shocked the other day when there were like 5 games left in the season and I saw that the St. Louis Cardinals hadn't been eliminated yet. I'm like, boy, I tuned them out a long time ago. And I assume that they didn't make the playoffs. So for me, it's the carrot. And I'm happy to chase that carrot, even though I don't know what's going to happen. I like the chase, and I do like the stuff that you talked about, Tyler. I think that's fascinating to see how a team develops. I just like to do both of those things at the same time and plug them into each other. That's what makes it fun for me. But I think some of it is I'm also an AP voter, so I'm paying attention. I have to pay attention to the rest of the teams.
All right. Mike DeVoy says, with Faison and Minchie both having higher QB ratings than Carr, do you think the fan base will be calling for a change at quarterback?
That's good. You know what is interesting about CJ Carr's pass efficiency rating? He's at 181.1 right now. That's about 20 points higher than the single season school record that was set way back in 1949 by Bob Williams and matched in 2009 by Jimmy Clausen. So I do think that's funny. I think we're probably going to talk about the PFF grade here at some point. But the one thing that CJ Carr was able to do in the last 2 weeks against power conference teams was have his game pass efficiency rating above 200. He was almost above 300 in the Purdue game. The last time that happened, a guy named Jarius Jackson did it back-to-back against Oklahoma and Arizona State in 1999.
All right. Speaking of that PFF rating, Jeff asked, please explain the rather low PFF ratings for Carr, Price, and Love. What gives were the ratings revised?
I'm going to let you take that since you dig into it. I saw them, but I'd like to hear what you deal with the PFF a lot more than I do.
Yeah. Well, first, I don't know that I can fully explain the ratings. Like, the ratings are, one, they're opinion based. Like, you got someone at Pro Football Focus is watching every play and giving them grades based on each play, and then a grade spits out based on the formula that they have. I don't. Carr's rating wasn't necessarily low. It was certainly lower than I would have expected it to be. I don't really know the answer to why that is. It was surprising to me because I was in charge of doing bringing some analysis to the PFF offensive grades off of this Arkansas game, and he had a 68.9, which was 10th best on Notre Dame's offense, which seems pretty crazy for anyone who watched the game. Now, it is important to note that some of the guys that graded higher played only a handful of snaps, and so those aren't really, like, the top 2 grades were Matt Jeffrey and Kenny Minchie, and those, I don't know, those are grades that we really put a lot of stock into. in terms of the outcome of the game. But Carr, he was only credited with one big time throw. I know that's one of the metrics that PFF charts. Let me see if I think I have that definition somewhere. They define that as a pass with excellent ball location and timing, generally thrown further down the field and or into a tighter window. So they deemed that he only did that once. They did say he had one turnover worthy play, which I'm sure you were dinged for negatively. I imagine it was the one throw to his left that it looked like the defensive back might be able to step in front of it that was thrown to Jordan Faison. I know in the press box, I was like, oh, this looks like it could be trouble, but it was not intercepted or even broken up. Jordan Faison still caught it. So that was surprising to me. I would have assumed that Love and Price would have been higher based on just sort of how unstoppable they felt like they were, especially Jeremiah Love. He still had a 79.7. That's still considered, a very good grade. I think part of it is when you see these numbers, they don't like a 90 and above is like almost untouchable. Like you're like the best of the best across college football to get there. Whereas like if you think about 90 in school, it's like, well, you got an A, and there's plenty of kids that get A's. And so I think some of that, there's a little bit of a disconnect when people see the grades and compare those. But a Price, I'm assuming, got dinged for, he had a 16.7 pass blocking grade. So that impacted him in having only a 71.5 offensive grade. I know we cite these ratings a lot, and use PFF because I think that it's interesting to see their views of the performances. But like, just because we talk about them doesn't mean that's like we always agree with them or that we think that they are like an absolute authority. I think it's just part of the conversation, and folks seem to be very interested in it. And I think the fact that they came up with a numerical system to sort of apply to players is why they've been so successful as a company.
Here's my 2 cents worth in. I think the Keurig machine broke. That's what I think happened with this evaluation of CJ Carr. You asked if they would be revised. They usually have revisions on Wednesdays where they are able to see the field better, and sometimes the grades shift very subtly and sometimes they shift more than subtly. So it'll be interesting to see if those change. That's all. That's my take. I have fun with those. I think they're really helpful in us getting at least a ballpark figure of how linemen are playing. And I love the snap counts. I love that about PFF.
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting other data. Like whether you agree with what a big time thrower isn't or isn't, like I think that's interesting. And average depth of target for throws is cool. And then break down like how CJ Carr is doing from passes from 10 to 20 yards and stuff like that. There's a lot of interesting data that they collect and chart that I find useful, even if I disagree with grades at times. Yeah, the revisions usually, like, I think it's important to know. I think if I remember this correctly from our conversations with PFF folks in the past, the first grades are based off of TV copy, so they're watching this game the same way you did at home, and then they will get the all 22 footage that maybe will allow them to see things better, and then also having another pair of eyes look through it that results in some of the tweaks later in the week that happen. All right. Mike DeVoy asked, Tyler, do you still do your film analysis stories? I really like the insights you shared in those stories. What did you think of the performance of Lambert and Ashton Craig against Arkansas? I do film analysis stories. I've been sort of breaking them up with Tyler Horka, where one of us will focus on offense and one of us will focus on defense each week. This is my week for defense, so I have not gone and reviewed Gerby Lambert and Ashton Craig sort of on a snap-by-snap basis like I would if I was doing an offense analysis this week. I think they were lower in their grades than I would have expected to see. Gerby Lambert, I think, has been a bit up and down this season. I think he makes a couple plays. You're like, wow, that's why there's so much confidence in him, and there's a lot of potential in what he can do. And then sometimes you scratch your head a little bit in terms of what he's done. I think Ashton Craig has been very steady for Notre Dame. I don't think that he played poorly against Arkansas by any means.
He gave a good pregame speech.
I don't remember him standing out either. It seemed like most of Notre Dame's rushing success was coming on the outside, and Arkansas was probably doing a good job against Notre Dame's interior linemen, and that's probably why the grades were a little bit lower. Scott Fegan says, I don't like calling out players because they give their all every game, but am I alone in thinking Bowen should not be put in coverage? That has to be his weak point. Should KVA take those plays?
Scott, I had somebody else ask me that question too last night. I think Bowen is decent in coverage. I think KVA is better. I think Madden Faremo is really good. But I think Bowen is a captain. I think he's pretty versatile. And I don't know that I would take him out of the game, but I would be cognizant of, like, let's say if we rewound the tape and Madden Faremo was playing, well, he wasn't even playing on defense yet at that point, but let's say he was playing at the level we've seen the past couple of weeks, maybe that Madden Faremo is the guy that you want on a tight end in that situation. But I think Drake Bowen is decent in coverage. I don't think that's his calling card. What do you think, Tyler?
Yeah, well, first, it's easier said than done. Like, you don't always know if the team's going to pass. Like, maybe we're just talking about 3rd and long situations.
Right, which that was a 4th and long, against A&M.
So in terms of, like, is he the best coverage linebacker that Notre Dame has? No, I don't think so. But he also brings a pass rush ability at the linebacker position. I thought he was particularly good in this Arkansas game in terms of pass rush. And so it's hard to take him off the field to give you that. And I think he could also be a decent spy and be someone responsible for making sure a quarterback doesn't escape. So I think he brings some things to the pass defense beyond just pass coverage that are important to why he stays on the field in certain passing situations. I think Kingston Viliamu-Asa is capable of a lot of those things. Kingston has not been as good as a pass rusher so far this year as I was expecting. I thought he would maybe take another step forward in that, and now maybe that's reflective of how he's been used. But I think that might be one of the reasons why Bowen is out there in some situations. But I think Viliamu-Asa is capable in coverage, and Madden Faremo, like Eric mentioned, has shown some things there. And I think that's probably a little bit why Notre Dame has tried to find ways to get him on the field.
I'm just looking at the PFF numbers for Bowen, and it seems like this scheme has probably not brought the best out of him yet compared to last year. And just, this isn't his overall grade, this is his coverage grade. His coverage grade is below par this year at 42.6. Last year it was 77.9. So again, maybe as he becomes more comfortable in the scheme, maybe that coverage grade goes up for him.
And it could be an instance too of defenses have decided, you know what, let's go after him too in coverage. Maybe they saw something that has allowed it to do that. I also he also has Notre Dame's top pass rush grade right now at a 75.7. Obviously, he has fewer snaps in terms of pass rush than someone like Boubacar.
He had 236 coverage snaps last year, which is a pretty large sample size.
All right, and he already has 99 this season. All right, Mike DeVoy says, are there any defenses remaining on the schedule that will seriously challenge this offense?
Oh, boy, I'm glad you asked that question. So when you look at total defenses that Notre Dame's going to face the rest of the season, including Boise, here are their total defense rankings. Boise is 56th. Then you go 112 for NC State, 72, 51, 29 and 37. That is Navy and Pitt. Then 124 is Syracuse, 119 is Stanford. So nobody higher than 29th. In terms of pass defenses, 37 for Boise in pass efficiency defense, and then 86, 103, 72nd, 65th, 85th, 76th, and 113th. So the ones I think will give them some issues are the teams with good run defenses, because they'll stack the line and they'll try to at least get Notre Dame in third and long. Pitt kind of falls into that category. Navy to a certain extent. USC was playing better run defense. Now that they're into their Big Ten schedule, they're not as stout against the run there. But compared to the offenses that Notre Dame's going to see, the offense has a much, on paper, easier matchup than the defense does against some really high-powered passing offenses coming up.
Yeah, I said yesterday on our roundtable show on the Blue and Gold channel that I'm not sure the next time I'll predict Notre Dame scoring fewer than 40 points, just because of the way the offense is playing and the defenses that it will be playing against. So certainly those defenses can improve by the time they play against Notre Dame, and maybe there are some teams that find a way to poke some holes in what Notre Dame is doing offensively. But I just think Notre Dame's offense is really humming right now, and as long as the offensive line continues to improve and have good communication and not allow bad sacks or commit too many penalties, I think this offense is going to be in really good shape. Scott Fegan says, who would you say is the MVP on offense and defense after 4 games?
Gosh, the offense is hard to split. I would probably say, oh God, you got to pick between those guys. Can I have a tie? I mean, Jeremiah Love does so many things, and what's probably underrated and underappreciated is what he's doing as a receiver, and how that puts a defense in a really bad place. But CJ Carr's growth and his ability to do things at the line of scrimmage is so huge. And I love Jadarian Price too. I'd throw him in that conversation too. I guess if I had to do, I don't know. I'll let me come back to that. Defensively, probably KVA. I mean, I think Tate Johnson's done a really good job. I would probably go with Kingston Viliamu-Asa on defense. And on offense, I'll go with Love and get tomatoes thrown at me.
Oh, well, I won't throw any tomatoes. I think I would go with Love too. I just think the offense is so much different when he's given the opportunity to touch the ball as many times as he has been given in these last few games. I think that is just of so much value to Notre Dame's offense that I know some people feel like you could just put Jadarian Price in there and it would be similar, but I'm not sure that I necessarily believe that, even though I think Jadarian Price is a very good running back, and the way that they use the two is a part of what makes the offense so good. Even though CJ Carr has been great, and I do think Carr is probably the one that allows this offense to take the next step forward, I'm not sure that this offense would be where it's at without Jeremiah Love. So that's why I would be picking him as the MVP. Defense is tough because I'm not sure that anyone is an obvious standout. I would probably go with Boubacar Traore, even though I don't know that he has quite met some of the expectations we have for him and impacted in the pass rush as much as we want him to. But I do think, like, for as bad as the pass rush has been at times this season, imagine what it would be like if he wasn't out there. And so I think that would be probably why I would go with Traore as my defensive MVP.
And Joe Long mentioned Rubio. I think Rubio has had a really good start to the year. PFF, for what it's worth, has Traore as Notre Dame's highest ranked defensive player through 4 games.
All right. Irish fan says, Eric, what does your current AP voting look like in regards to the rest of our schedule?
okay, what does my current AP voting look like in regards to the rest of the schedule? Tyler, can you translate? Because I don't understand the question.
I was hoping maybe you would understand better than I did too. Maybe he means
Can
or
you
I don't know.
clarify, Irish fan? Because I'm not
Yeah.
sure.
I mean, maybe like you don't have any of the opponent. Do you have any of them ranked? The future opponents ranked? Is that what he's referencing to?
I wrote on my behind the ballot column that, some of Notre Dame's schedule took a hit this past week, which doesn't help Notre Dame. And it doesn't doom them from not making the playoffs, but our playoff. NC State lost a very close game at home to Virginia Tech. USC loses at the end of the game against Illinois. Pittsburgh lost by a touchdown to Louisville, who's undefeated. Syracuse got drubbed by Duke at home. There was one other team kind of in that mix that lost that knocked down Notre Dame's strength of schedule. I mean, they don't have any cupcakes unless Stanford, the bottom falls out on them completely. And so the other thing that kind of works into their favor is the fact that the committee is now emphasizing good losses, and they're doing that as a directive because they want teams to continue to schedule difficult non-conference games. That will help Notre Dame, provided Miami and Texas A&M are top 15 teams at the end of the year. They're top 6 now, and that's helping Notre Dame. But Notre Dame looking like they did on Saturday, it helps their own cause better than what other teams on the schedule are doing. But I think most of those teams that we kind of threw out there are going to end up with winning records. They're just not going to be probably top 25 teams. USC might jump back into the top 25 after its bye. If it beats Michigan, they could be ranked when they come to Notre Dame Stadium. Navy might be ranked, and they probably will be undefeated when they come to Notre Dame Stadium in November. But, you're going to have multiple losses with the other teams.
Yeah, Irish fan said just future strength of schedule. So do you think USC is the most likely of the remaining teams that could be ranked when Notre Dame plays now?
I do, provided they beat Michigan. But I think Navy could be ranked. They could be, because if they're undefeated, I think they will be in the top 25. They will have just beaten a decent North Texas team. I know people are probably giggling at North Texas, but they're actually a pretty good offensive team. Their schedule is very back-end loaded. After they play Notre Dame, they play South Florida, who I think is really good, and they play Army. So, again, they could be ranked when they play Notre Dame.
Am I remembering correct? Was someone needling you about not ranking North Texas? Is that something that happened on the message board?
I don't know that he was needling me as much as I think he was testing me to know if I knew who the Mean Green were, and I do. I think he was just having fun. I don't think he really thought North Texas is a top 25 team. And if he is, I'm going to check the liquor cabinets at his house.
Oh, it could be a North Texas alum. We have Notre Dame fans from all over on the loose emoji board. So I remember seeing that, and I when I asked, I'm not certain. I was like, I'm pretty sure Mean Green is North Texas, as long as I'm remembering that correctly too. So that was the way why I phrased that. And for those that maybe don't remember, what is your current rankings of Miami and A&M? Where do you have them ranked?
I have Miami 3, and off the top of my head, I think I have A&M 7 or 8. They're 6 in the actual poll. I have them right around that area, but I had Oregon 2 and Miami 3.
All right, let's talk a little bit more about defensive improvements and lingering concerns that I wanted to discuss. What I think Notre Dame did an impressive job in limiting a prolific Arkansas offense to 13 points and 365 yards, and maybe most importantly, just 207 passing yards. What part of Notre Dame's defensive improvement seems the most sustainable to you, Eric?
Well, the pass rush and the back end of the defense are so coupled together. But if I have to uncouple them, I will say the back end of the defense. I think Notre Dame's pass defense, especially when Leonard Moore comes back, is going to continually get better. I think they've kind of figured out how to marry up the front with the back end of the defense and have them surge forward. But I'm encouraged about linebacker play as well. But for me, the pass defense, and it's going to be tested the most. That's what's interesting. There's, I think, 5 of Notre Dame's next 7 opponents are in the top 20 in passing yards per game. So we'll know.
I didn't go with a position group. I went with turnovers. And I think that's a result of Notre Dame playing more decisively that allows you to be in positions to create turnovers and have the confidence to go for a strip or put yourself in a position for an interception. And I think there were some opportunities for those turnovers in the early part of the season that Notre Dame didn't necessarily capitalize on. And I think, although I think analytics folks, at least I've heard that it's hard to predict turnovers. It's a very hard thing to predict because there's a lot of chance that's involved with turnovers. But my sense is that is something that Notre Dame will be able to continue to do at a better rate than it was doing to start the season. What about the pass rush? That was one of the areas that you talked about in terms of the improvement. Why do you think Notre Dame had a better pass rush, and do you think that can be repeated consistently?
Boy, I'll tell you what, I wish we had Al Washington coming in for the coaches availability tomorrow. We do not. We have an offensive coach. I would say just them getting used to, okay, this is how we're going to do the pass rush in this scheme. This is how it's being taught to us. And Marcus Freeman, we don't want to hear him yelling anymore, so we're going to get after it. It just seemed like, I mean, those first 2 offensive lines that Notre Dame played, I think will, at the end of the year, be maybe at least semifinalists for the Joe Moore Award. I don't think Arkansas was bad offensive line. And you wonder too, Tyler, if, I know Botello only played 19 snaps, but if Botello and Boubacar Traore are just kind of getting their sea legs back in terms of, it's been a long time since those guys have played in football games. That was last September since either one played in a game. And maybe, it's just coming along there. I'll lean into your answer.
Yeah, you and Joe Long are on the same wavelength, right? Right as you started to talk about Botello, he said, I think Botello finally trusts he can go full attack and not worry about his injuries.
And that's a big thing, that mental part of it when you talk to players.
Yeah, I think the fact that Notre Dame got something from Jordan Botello was a part of the reason why the pass rush was improved. I think has felt like it's Boubacar Traore or bust in terms of the pass rush. I think the linebackers also had a lot to do with Notre Dame generating pressure at a higher rate, whether that's how they're deciding to blitz them or if those guys are doing something better individually. I haven't had enough time to sort of analyze that. Maybe that's something I will get into here with my film analysis this week. But I thought the linebackers rushed the passer better than they have so far this season. So I think that can be a positive for Notre Dame moving forward. One thing that I asked Marcus Freeman about was the running attack that Arkansas had. I thought particularly in the first half, Arkansas had a decent amount of success against Notre Dame running the football. Do you think there is a reason to be concerned about what Arkansas was able to do there?
When I was watching the game, I was somewhat concerned about it. And yet they seemed to find answers in the second half. And then when I heard Marcus Freeman talk about it today, when he was talking about, okay, this was a technique breakdown, and he was very specific in what he was trying to describe, and he could even remember what the mistake was. He seemed very confident. I think where in the past where I've seen Notre Dame defenses struggle and there aren't answers, and we're going back to the Charlie Weiss era and some of the others, is Notre Dame to have the team speed on defense. I do think they have it. And so that's why I'm somewhat encouraged about the potential for this team to get better and run defense. What are your thoughts, Tyler?
Yeah. Marcus Freeman talked about sort of the read options that Taylon Green was able to get some longer runs on. Mike Washington did some damage too. He had a couple of gains of more than 10 yards in that first half. I do think there's a concern against good offensive lines. Like, is Arkansas' offensive line as good as Miami and A&M's? Maybe not, but I don't think Notre Dame necessarily had a personnel advantage with the defensive line versus Arkansas's offensive line. I think for as much as Arkansas's program is in disarray, I think their offensive line is pretty good. The combination of that O-line and a running quarterback like Taylor Green and a decent back like that made the rushing attack a lot to sort of handle. I'm not sure if Notre Dame will get challenged as much with the quality of offensive line and a running quarterback in the same way that Arkansas did. But it is something I'm keeping an eye on. The way I asked my question to Marcus Freeman was if it had anything to do with Notre Dame being so concerned about trying to stop explosive plays in the passing game. And he didn't think that was why. He said it was just specific to those Taylor Green runs. It was technique by I would assume, defensive ends who were left open as the read options and sort of gave him a lane to get around them. One thing I wanted to follow up with you on, I don't know if it was Football Number 6, it probably was, or maybe it was the podcast. You said you thought Arkansas was the best offense Notre Dame will have played against this season to this point. Do you still believe that coming out of the game?
Well, they didn't look like it on Saturday. They didn't play like it, but I give Notre Dame some credit. When you look at who Notre Dame has played this year, Miami is 29th in total offense. A&M is 23rd. Purdue is 73rd. Arkansas, even after that performance, is 10th. So, I mean, according to the numbers, they are. And then Boise is 9th. USC is 3rd. So those are coming up on the schedule. NC State is 56th, but 9th and 3rd. I think Arkansas has played better teams than Boise has, and Arkansas put 35 points up on the number 4 team in the country in Ole Miss. So I'm gonna stick with my guns on that. I think Arkansas, because of their quarterback, as long as he doesn't go in the tank with interim coach Bobby Petrino and the whole defensive staff fired, and be interesting to see how this team navigates a really difficult rest of their schedule.
And excuse me, Ed Straub asked, what is the most pressing worry for the Boise State game? And that was part of the reason I asked that question to Marcus Freeman about the running game of Arkansas, because Boise State's running game, I think, is something that Notre Dame has to be concerned about stopping with 3 different running backs that it likes to use. Certainly they don't have Ashton Genty back there, but I think they have talented running backs in terms of what they want to do offensively. And I think if Boise State has its way, it will try to run the ball. I'm not sure. And it'll be interesting to see how well Notre Dame's able to do that, and if it maybe beefs up and isn't as afraid of the passing attack of Boise State. But I'm not sure that Notre Dame, I guess depending on if Leonard Moore plays, maybe that would influence how Notre Dame would approach that.
So for me, if I'm a defensive coordinator, I think the hardest teams to play against and make a game plan against are teams that put you in a pass run dilemma on virtually every down, unless it's 3rd and long. I guess you're only in pass. But Arkansas is 24th in rushing offense, 19th in passing offense, and they're a good pass efficiency team. Boise is 20 and 20. USC is 17 and 5. Those are difficult teams to defend. You look at some of the other ones on the schedule, they're so imbalanced that I think it's easier to come up with a game plan. BC is 4th in passing offense, 125th in rushing offense. Pitt, very similar. Syracuse, very similar. Navy, just the opposite. Flip it. So you have offenses that are one-dimensional. The fact that Boise has that kind of variety, I do think that is a difficult challenge.
All right. Scott Fegan said, did Ash simplify the defense so they can attack more, or did Marcus Freeman take over more of the play calling?
I know that everybody would love for the answer to be Marcus took over the play calling. I don't think that happened. And I think what it was, and I wrote a column about this, and I had some good inside information to go with what Marcus Freeman said today. it was a matter of, I guess in a way, is just fitting the defensive scheme better to what Notre Dame's personnel was. If that's simplifying it, Tyler described it a little bit earlier. You can play cover 3-5 different ways. Maybe you only need to play it one way and be really good at it. And so I think all those things help. But I think the one thing that I took away from today was, for Marcus Freeman, the work isn't over with this defense. It's not, they've turned the corner now. They can kind of put it in cruise control. He wants them to be uncomfortable, the players, the coaches, and they were. I mean, from what I heard, the paint was peeling off the walls in the meeting on Sunday. And I think that speaks to Marcus Freeman's leadership, his expertise, and his authenticity, that he was willing to go that. And he wore out the word uncomfortable today in the press conference, which was neat to see because it's usually execution. And so that was a good change. But I think it's more about getting this to fit the defensive players. And that's what Marcus's challenge was in 2021 as well. A lot of times you say, well, here's my recipe and I'm going to bring it over here and it's going to work just as good in this kitchen, and it doesn't. And Marcus did that coming from Cincinnati. So he wasn't even coming from the NFL. He was coming from another college program. And sometimes you just have to adjust and again, make sure that the players know what they're doing, and also that they're bought into this concept. Because I'm going to tell you this, the mythology that Chris Ash tried to spread, that this was Al Golden 2.0 defense, wasn't that at all. There was a lot more changes in this defense than what was advertised. And so there was a lot more adjusting for this team to do.
Yeah, I'm not saying Scott is doing this. I think it's a fair question to ask. I do think some of it is like almost like a confirmation bias. If you think Chris Ash is terrible, when the defense does better, you want to give Marcus Freeman the credit rather than giving it to Chris Ash. Like, in terms of being the play caller, unless we know for sure that Marcus Freeman is calling the plays, I don't think it's fair to assume that, because coaches can also, like, just like a player can have a good game or improve, like coaches can improve too. And so I think Marcus Freeman's involvement probably is informing a lot of the improvement. But I don't think it's as simple as, well, Marcus Freeman's calling more plays now. And Chris Ash is just a puppet out there, and not having a voice in what's going on.
I think especially in this program, coaching is so much more collaborative than people think. It's not you're on an island and boy, you better do your job, and if you don't, you're going to bed without supper. I think they work together to try to find solutions. And so as part of the solution, Marcus Freeman, absolutely, it's a big part. The way that his approach was incredible and his leadership was incredible during this particular week. Now that has to continue. But again, it's a collaboration, and Chris Ash deserves some credit as well.
Brian said Adon Schuler had a nice ball game after being pretty tentative the first two games. Your thoughts?
I didn't watch him as much as maybe Tyler did, so I'll let you speak to that a little bit. I didn't notice him making mistakes, but I wasn't watching him as closely. I was watching Tate Johnson. Sorry.
Yeah, I thought Schuler played well. I think certainly his recognition of an opportunity to strip the football, I thought that was that turned the game into a joke at that point. Like, that allowed Notre Dame to just sort of completely, I think, also allowed the crowd to really turn on Arkansas and then start heading for the exit when he stripped the ball, and then allowed Notre Dame to score one more time before halftime. I think certainly he's had an interesting season in terms of targeting and then having to miss some time. So I think his season has been a little bit up and down, and was in a situation in the Miami game where it felt like he could have maybe created a turnover, or at least prevented a touchdown, and that didn't happen. I did think he was playing more assertive against Arkansas, and I think it's important that his growing development and rapport with Tate Johnson alongside him. I think that the way those two played together can make a difference for Notre Dame secondary based on what we saw from it at the beginning of the season. All right. What do you want to get into here real quick before we get out of here, Eric? Do you want to talk recruiting? You want to talk 5 emerging players? What tickles your fancy?
I like the 5 emerging players, but I'm willing to go down the recruiting if there's some significant visitors and significant developments happening.
I don't know.
To say.
I don't know that there's significant developments happening. Obviously, what happened last week was Richie Flanagan committed to Notre Dame.
Okay, let's get that
a defensive tackle. Obviously, the younger, well, maybe not obviously, but the younger brother of James Flanagan, not Cooper Flanagan's younger brother. So I guess that definitely is not obvious unless you have seen the spelling of his last name. And the son of Jim Flanagan. Rivals, interestingly enough, has him as a 3-star recruit, the number 10 interior offensive lineman, and number 222 overall in the 2027 class. 6'3", 265 is what we have him listed as. He plays both ways in high school in Wisconsin. I think he could be an offensive lineman in college, but I think defensive tackle is where Notre Dame is trying to get him to play and is more interested in him. But I think he's someone that you sort of get him here and figure it out. I think right now my thoughts were, at least from his sophomore film, that I thought he played quicker on offense than he does on defense. He's a very strong kid, and someone that I'm interested in seeing his development as we move forward in his high school career. He's early on in his junior season. I didn't have access to much, if any, of his junior film yet, and so we'll see what he's got going on there. Jim Linton, we talked about Charles Jagusah earlier in the show. If you want to head back and listen to what Eric has learned there, go ahead and give your 5 emerging players, Eric, if you want. We talked about trying to identify 5 players who you think are ready to emerge into bigger roles for Notre Dame.
Yeah, and I'm trying not to get people that are playing a ton right now. So I went with Elijah Hughes, Cole Mullen on the defensive line, James Flanagan at tight end, and that's kind of a reach, but I think in a few weeks we're going to start to see him more regularly than the 11 snaps he played on Saturday. Dallas Golden and Madden Faremo. Those are my 5. How about yours?
Yeah, I like that list. I included Dallas Golden on mine, Elijah Hughes. I put Luke Talich on my list.
Yep. Good.
Cole Mullins as well. I had a hard time coming up with another one because I like the other ones are guys that I think play a decent amount, but I think they are like ascending in their roles. And so either Will Pauling or Jaden Greathouse, like they're starting to impact the offense now.
Why don't you say Jeremiah Love? One of our coworkers would have done that. Former.
So I think I had I didn't come up with a good 5th one. Folks are suggesting Nolan James, Jabron Payne. I'm just not sure that there's going to be opportunities for there. I mean, maybe Aeneas Williams is someone that hasn't had a lot of opportunities yet. We'll get there. I think I like Nolan James as a player, but I'm not sure.
And not just because he's related.
And he's not related for the record. Yeah, I mean, Notre Dame has played so many players that it's hard to come up with a really long list of guys, especially with how well the offensive players. I don't know that there's a lot of opportunities for guys to ascend into roles that haven't already been established. All right, I think that'll do it for us here on Football Never Sleeps. We appreciate you guys joining us tonight. Thank you to Academy Sports and Outdoors, and we will talk to you later this week on the Third and Gold podcast. Check that out. And then, as always, our post-game takeaways after the Boise State game. Everyone have a good week.